¿Qué tal todos? Bienvenidos al canal y para mis suscriptores, cuánto me alegra volver a verlos. Hoy escuchamos la canción Es por ti, una de las más populares del cantante colombiano Juanes, y hablaremos de lo que podemos aprender. Now, before we get too far into this, I do just want to remind you guys, I am always taking suggestions for content for new immersion exercises. Whatever it is out there in the Spanish-speaking world, whether it's movies or books or TV shows or podcasts or songs, TikTok videos, Facebook memes, whatever else. If it's something that you love and it's in Spanish, let me know what you got. And your suggestion could just be our next immersion exercise where we connect to the Spanish-speaking culture while we learn the language. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the song.
Cada vez que me levanto y veo que a mi lado estás, me siento renovado y me siento aniquilado si no estás.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is where he says aniquilado si no estás. So he's saying destroyed if you're not there. I feel destroyed if you're not there. But where does he say the word there? I don't see an ahí, I don't see allí, allá. None of that is in this sentence here. He's just saying aniquilado si no estás. Well, the verb estar can be used to talk about somebody being there, as in indicating their presence without actually specifying that specific location. So, for example, you can say something like, Ayer fui a tu casa pero no estabas, which means yesterday I went to your house but you weren't there. It's not really necessary that we specified the location where this person is or isn't at. The more important thing is that we're describing their presence, whether or not they are present. So when we say no estás, that's a sentence on its own. It's just you're not there or you're not here. It's kind of irrelevant as to the specific location, which is why we don't have to include that word. We're just saying whether or not they're present. So in this case, he's saying aniquilado si no estás. I feel destroyed if you're not there. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Tú controlas toda mi verdad y todo lo que está de más. Tus ojos me llevan lentamente al sol y tu boca me habla del amor y el corazón. Tu piel tiene el color de un rojo atardecer y es por ti.
Okay, so now we've gotten to the name of the song, Es por ti. So he's saying it's because of you. So like I talked about in my video on por versus para, the word por is always going to be working its way from something. So it's often used to describe our motivation, our reason for doing something, the cause that led to a certain action. So in this case, he's saying, es por ti, and then he goes into all these different things that his life has changed because of this woman. So if he were to say something like, es para ti, it's more like saying it's to your benefit, or you're the recipient of it. So when I say, este video es para ti, I'm saying this video is for you. And of course, there's times where we could use por and para in a sentence, and they can both work and say different things. They'll have different meanings. So for example, if you're a father and you work really hard because of your daughter, because you want her to have a good life, and you work really hard for her benefit, you could say something like, trabajo muy duro por y para mi hija. So you're saying, I work very hard because of and for my daughter. So she's the reason why he works, but she's also the recipient of it. She's the anticipated result of the hard work, is that she's going to have a better life. All right, hope that makes sense. Go check out my video on por versus para if you want more information. Okay, let's move on. right, okay. I'm just goofing off here. He's not actually saying me siento un vagabundo to say I'm sitting on a vagrant or I sit down on a vagrant. He's saying I feel like a vagrant. So the point that I'm really trying to make here is that context is very important in Spanish. There's a lot of words in Spanish that have multiple meanings, which can be very different from each other. And the context is really the only way that you're going to know what the person is actually saying. Obviously, he's not saying I sit down on a vagrant. He's saying I feel like a vagrant. Me siento como un vagabundo. But in this case, he's saying me siento un vagabundo. When you're saying I feel like a something, like if you want to say I feel like a winner, me siento un ganador, you don't have to use como. You can. It's not really going to be necessary, but it doesn't take away from anything. But me siento un vagabundo just means I feel like a vagrant. So just keep an eye out for that difference in context. I had a TikTok video that I was going to save for another immersion exercise at some point. But while we're talking about it right now, I'll just go ahead and throw it in real quick for you guys. So let me just do that real quick and then we'll get back to it and try again, okay?
Se robaron las sillas de mi casa. Y adivina cómo me siento.
Oh, and real quick before we dive in, just in case you're wondering the difference between me siento and siento, well, me siento is used to talk about how we feel. It's like an internal sensation that's not necessarily brought about by external forces. So it's how you feel. Whereas siento is what you feel. So that is brought about by something external. So when you say siento el sol, you're saying I feel the sun. Whereas if you say me siento, you're talking about like a feeling that you have or a certain emotion that you could be feeling or something like that. So just keep that in mind, okay?
Me siento un vagabundo, perdido por el mundo, desordenado si no estás. ¿Cómo mueves tú mi felicidad y todo lo que está de más?
Okay, so just real quick, I want to talk about the difference between this phrase, demás, and the word demás with no space in between. So the phrase demás is talking about like an extra something or a spare something. When you say tengo una llanta de más, you're saying I have a spare tire. When you use it without the space, you're saying a word which means other. So it can be used like an adjective to say the other of something. So you could say something like los demás platos están sucios to say the other plates are dirty, or it can be used as a noun, as a pronoun to replace something else to say the rest or the others. So when you're saying, I want to do something for the others, you would say, para los demás. Quiero hacerlo para los demás. I want to do it for the benefit of the others or the rest of everybody. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Tus ojos me llevan lentamente al sol y tu boca me habla del amor y el corazón. Tu piel tiene el color de un rojo atardecer y es por ti que late mi corazón y es por ti que he vuelto a hablar de amor y es por ti que brillan mis ojos hoy y es por ti que calma mi dolor. Cada vez que me levanto.
All right, so just real quick, I want to talk about this phrase, me levanto, where you're saying I get up. Cada vez que me levanto, every time that I get up. So when you're saying to wake up in Spanish, you're going to use the verb despertarse. Despertarse means to wake up. Despertar means to wake. So if you want to wake somebody else, you're going to use the verb despertar and then describe them as the object. But when you say despertarse as a reflexive verb, you're saying to wake up, to wake yourself up. Whereas levantar usually means to lift or to raise or something like that. Levantarse means to get up or, you know, to lift yourself up, to raise yourself up. So that is a distinction in Spanish that we don't often use in English, the difference between waking up and getting up, but there is a difference there. If you wake up, but you keep laying in bed for a little while before you actually get up and start getting ready to start your day, well, ya has despertado, pero todavía no has levantado. You have woken up, but you haven't yet gotten up. Okay, that's the only thing I want to talk about here. Let's move on.
Y veo que a mi lado estás, me siento renovado. Tus ojos me llevan lentamente al sol y tu boca me habla del amor y el corazón. Tu piel tiene el color de un rojo atardecer y es por ti.
All right, so the last thing I want to talk about before we go ahead and wrap up is where he says, he vuelto a hablar de amor. So he's saying, I've started to talk about love again. So that verb, volver, and in this case, he's using the past participle with the perfect aspect. He's saying, he vuelto, is used to say that you've done something again. Volver a is a phrase that's followed by a verb in the infinitive to talk about doing something again. If we wanted to try to translate this literally, you could say something like that I have spoken about love again, that I've spoken about love again. But really what he's saying is I've started talking about love again. But he's saying he vuelto a hablar de amor. So that verb volver a is very useful when you want to talk about doing something again. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. Ok, damas y caballeros, pues eso es todo lo que les tengo para este video. Espero que les haya gustado y que hayan aprendido algo útil hoy. Déjame un comentario si tienes alguna pregunta acerca de lo que hemos cubierto hoy y te atenderé. Muchísimas gracias por ver. Nos vemos pronto. Chao.